Hello, this is Dr. Jacina Agnieszka Chevalier. In this video, I will continue speaking on chapter 12, which is a continuation of History Will Teach Us Something, to make a connection that on an epidemiologic approach that I am proposing to assume as veracious and test in many areas, and immediately, for reasons of bioethics, it actually in omission kills, introduce to whatever it is that you do as work. And I would this video was inspired in United States by my trip across 49 states, and the reason why I am actually talking about it now is to, however, speak about other historic atrocities and crimes that pushed a person who originally had good intentions to kill, harm, mutilate, and order such in many different regimes actually, and not only regimes, in actually also what was seemingly a republic or a commune, and persons were well in abundance, possessing abundance. And so we need to understand cause effect is observable and logical between such as having a group of rats poisoned with rat poison hidden in food, and at the same time having rats as pets. That's an example. And rats that are free in herd to have non-distorted perception because of non-consumption of killed food and non-killing. Those rats actually send to the ecosystem in rats dying with a substance that causes neuronal progressive paralysis, or like the past the poisons causes bleeding out to tissues and death in bleeding out, diluting blood, preventing coagulation, depending on what components of blood thinners that poison had. And the new one is a neurotoxin, and that is the same as fishing mixed into feeding animals, and that is the cause. That phenomenon, described phenomenon, is a cause of having then a perception of a human loved one in children and in adults, such as a mother, a father, an auntie, or someone very well known, friend of the family, friends in children, many children. Me too, we've experienced that persons shift in a perception of a child to bring upon a child and an adult fear and anger, and being then that called paranoia or terror, depending on the age, and further medicated, brings in a dynamic in which those children and adults chronically are in fact being poisoned for fearing that an adult that is capable of poisoning as normal some animals with food, like those rats described in prior as cause, okay, of that also capable of having one of them only pampered and fed food without the poison, and do the same then in speech, for instance, speaking well about some humans or some children, bad about some, that adult, for instance, upset, or even in facial expressions, is not trustworthy with child or adult's life. And that is because another creature alive is being tricked to take something seemingly lovingly given to another to die or to be harmed, and that is then translated into many mental disorders, not only night terrors. And perception that, for example, when I was a child, my common nightmare was that I would dream that when somebody was breaking into our house, that my mother and my father, when they turned towards me around, were not the same person. Assumption of nature of in those persons of a victim that inhuman, non-human appears in change of energy and physical and facial characteristics. That I denominated ego self-shifting and is observable, is often causing in persons, in adults, changes in character, mistaking names, is a vendetta for whatever is being killed with, for instance, rat poison by other humans, that adults participating with payments or calling it normal then, while pampering a rat bought in, for instance, PetSmart or whatever that place is, and having then the same attitude, nice one, to a child, and then another one not nice to another child or an adult, is scary and unpredictable and considered double-natured. And so that is true, ladies and gentlemen, that we all, the same as in ancient Rome, the same as in cases of Stalin, who introduced, after having those 5-year plans to plan rationally the amount of just given of killing killed animals, killed fish, killed this and killed that, promoting humans all as friends, and trying to provide all of housing and everything for others, but you see, omitting other creatures as tools, alive ones, to serve to humans and animals, or animals befriended to humans. And slowly that leads to first non-justifiable paranoia and then justifiable paranoia, and seeking for enemies, as well as a visible mistrust from person to person in search for homicidal tendencies towards self or treachery. Because how is that, ladies and gentlemen, that a good mama, for instance, is so nice and places, for instance, a rat outfit to her daughter for a Halloween fest, or when I had the kindergarten dress up, for instance, and ears, and calls, little daughter, my little micey, and this is sweet and all that, and then gave money to some company to have the whole house filled with neurotoxin, and having rats and cats bleed out visibly to that child in cheese served on sandwiches of a child. That to a child first and then to adults is seemingly possible to explain, but in fact it is not controllable on large masses, the same as a large amount, for instance, of food, when a person has nothing to eat lying next to, will make a person hungry and reach out, while if person leaves, that hunger will lower down and it will lead to another source of food. And that is the same with that phenomenon. And so you see, many persons, such as Che Guevara, such as also in Argentina there was a regime of the lieutenants, I think those were lieutenants, a group of military that formed a so-called junga and took over the country, because the persons would be killing and starved if it was not done, and were paralyzing, similar to the United States institutions, because of the economy and the distribution of goods was in exclusion of animals, and that is the culprit, you need to understand. Instead of planning that welfare, common welfare, is for all, and also adding human as part of the ecosystem, meaning a human is allowed to sit on earth because I, for instance, don't have wings. So if I don't have, for instance, money to rent a hotel, or a place to go, then I do not have any other choice. I have to sit somewhere, even if there is a sign, do not sit here. Or I have to go somewhere and park somewhere, even if there is no parking. And that applies to all of us, the same as a wild, for instance, rat living in a forest. And so we need to understand that sometimes we expect persons to not fear us, whereas we behave towards one another the same way as we normalized a behavior towards dogs, rats, and other animals. And that leads to and led to, in amount of progress, amount of consumed meat, consumed vast amounts of goods when no thirst, for instance, wine and all of those in many countries, also in Argentina during those regimes, in Cuba during that dictatorship, as well as in Piłsudski's regime and during occupations that I can also explain how the dynamic was. I did a little bit of that online, but the bottom line here is this: the humans who seemingly shift do not change. This is the same good human, the same as all of those then executed, like Che Guevara persons, from an idealist who on a motorcycle for free was providing across Latin America medical services in exchange for food or a sandwich. He did not change when he gained power. He simply started to be in charge of amounts of infrastructure that kills animals and at least traps animals and mutilates animals in proportions to some humans. And he was in charge of that, and therefore being most important persons in disobedience to, for instance, refusing, well, I don't know, use of pesticides when there's a food storage of fruits, and those fruits are bad and on fruit mice. And so there's no time, and the same as with an antibiotic, and persons kill. So persons started to refuse, and that person, because of being in charge, would have all of the dying animals create a message of rage and seek persons responsible for it as traitors. Because killing animals does lead only to death in disease, or killing, instinct to kill of humans, or self-annihilation, instinct to seek, for instance, to spare an animal instead of an animal a coffee, because that drink actually, instead of a meal, does not kill a chicken, and it's an instinct. Persons then say, oh, but that person's cells or brain functions abnormally. Like I said, we are not in vacuum, and we are not devoid of possibility to restore immediately, in fact, normal functioning in all persons based on the current amount of limbs to functionality painlessly, if what is being killed and is suffering stops to be such, and what is needed to obtain, expressed in craving, provided in another way, ingenuity. And so this is important because there is cause effect, and I am planning now, because I am only at chapter now, still 12, the book called Diagnostico Statistical Manual 666. It is not a joke. I did plan a spoof about it, but I'm planning to add the cause of what is being done currently to animals and other humans, and migration and movement in areas that influences behaviors, speech, as well as looks, to manifestations in body, in mental changes that are adaptation mechanisms, and aversion is to stay away from something, while pleasure is to approach something, and very little in it is sex. And I can prove that right now, actually, in anecdotes and in many other ways. If we kill and fertilize and rape, we have such urge. Given another type of treatment, respectful treatment and opportunity, we do not do such. And when we do not know, because one statement from one minute to another from a person's opinion becomes from I love you to a pet rat to I love you to a mark as a rat that eats crops, and that I love you then to a child, in many cases then in adulthood, ends in taking out a gun and shooting someone. And we can change it, and we have to change it now. So do your role.